good afternoon, Carl.
Hello, Michael Kitces. Hey, I have a question for you before we dive in.
Okay, what's the question?
Do you remember being on a panel with me at an FPA retreat and me and Tim Maurer and you, Tim Maurer and I, like when
Oh,
we were
really?
little,
This is like 10
young.
years
Oh,
ago.
longer than that. Like we were young. Nobody knew any of us.
What were we talking about?
I can't, it's where I first mentioned the term real financial planning. Do you remember
Ah,
this? I think we were in Florida and it was you, Tim, and I. And we were just, I don't know how that they found the three of us because we were just little dudes doing work. You don't remember this? Well, you've been on so many of those that you just
yeah.
it
I
probably.
mean, I don't remember the conversation what we were doing. I do remember having that panel with us talking about just like future evolution of planning because that's kind
Yeah,
of the conversations we like to have at retreat
yeah,
and the
yeah,
whole dynamic. Well, then and still, like, there's all these people that say they're doing financial planning, but they're
yeah,
not,
yeah,
not really, or they're only doing it because it's means to some other end. And you know,
yeah.
you went further with real financial planning. I started calling them financial advisors to separate them out. I feel
That's
like there's a
right.
lot that came forth from that. Tim still likes to talk about real financial planning and life planning.
So good. It was just interesting to think back on those days and Alan being around, and I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many folks that have been around for so long, making such an impact. It's been fun to watch everybody.
Well,
So anyway,
shout
sorry,
out,
off
shout out for
topic.
FPA retreat. It makes wonderful
Yeah,
conversations.
exactly right. Memorable forever.
So ironically, in that theme of like calling back some old conversations, um, so I'd well, obviously, like we've had the drumbeat for many years now around the value of finding a niche and pursuing a niche as an advisor. Like, I mean, we've written about this on Nerd's Eye View for 10 plus years. And so we had I had a
Did you
wonderful
say
question.
niche?
Niche, don't start, Carl.
I
Niche.
just, well, first of all, we're going to talk about niches again. This niche thing, everywhere you go, niche, niche, niche.
Yes. But to be fair, like, we're going to talk about it from the perspective of someone who's challenging the assumption a little, which I
I
appreciate.
know
Like,
that's why I'm
you can
excited. But
challenge
let's get it.
us. You can
Yeah,
challenge
and
us. So
yeah.
the comment that came in was, which I think is a really good criticism worth talking about. The idea of every advisor finding a niche has the assumption that every client will fit into a niche.
That's so good.
Is this a valid assumption? Like, is this assumption right? Is this assumption wrong? As this person put it, I would just love to hear Kitces and Carl debate this assumption. So I guess I've been painted into one corner by my historical niche stance and you have another, but I've got some views actually on both ends of this. So I thought it's an interesting conversation as we talk about the value of niching for advisors. Like, are we implicitly assuming every client has a niche? Is that a valid assumption? How should we think about this? So
Meaning, like, does every client fit in some, every human out there that we refer to as clients fits in some category that an advisor would want to serve or
yeah, I
might
mean
pick
that
as a
right. At least
niche?
that's the implication. If every
Yeah.
advisor is going to choose a niche, the implication is, well, every client who needs service has to fit a niche. Otherwise, there's like clients who need advice and advisors who won't serve them. Like, oh, I'm sorry, you fit none of the available niches on the list. You shan't be served here. Uh but I think it's a good question as we keep
I
talking about
agree. It's
advisors
totally a
getting
good question.
more and more specialized in what they do in a particular niches. Like,
Yeah.
I guess sort of think, is this a risk from the advisor end? But I think to me, there's even sort of a more cosmic, like, as a profession, are we going to leave a segment of the world unserved if we all
Yeah.
go down our little niche routes and suddenly there are clients who don't fit a niche? If that's true, that clients don't fit a niche. So I guess the
Yeah.
first question, even that I would put to you, just sort of on points to this discussion, like, there's an implied assumption here. Every client should be able to fit into some niche. Is that a valid assumption?
Yeah. Can I look, I feel like I'm gonna do something that's very, it's a great risk because I want to do it with deep empathy, like, because I do this and we haven't identified who said this. I hope they listen to it and I want them to know, like, this, I'm doing this with a deep empathetic hug. But part of me is sort of like, who cares? it feels a little bit, and
Part
again,
of
I
you
think
is
it's
what?
I can't say it again. But it feels like an interesting debate. But I just want to point to, I want to point to one thing. I'm really stumbling around here because I want to do this with deep empathy. So much of our really like the we spend a lot of time on questions that are places to hide. And I just want to, I'm not even saying this person's doing it because they sent it as an interesting question, but I'm just saying there would be a temptation here. And we see this a lot with niches. So maybe I can go that direction. Please, whoever asked this question, love, deep empathy. This isn't about you. We see this often happen a lot with niches where people will spend a bunch of time thinking about things that don't actually really matter so they can avoid doing the work. Like what niche, how deep should I go?
Okay,
How
so
narrow should I
you're just
go?
raising the question, like, are we potentially putting this out there because in reality we just don't want to have to pick a niche, and this is like a way to avoid
Yeah.
making the
This
this
person isn't
decision?
doing that. This person isn't doing that. I just think which niches generally, it's like one of the it seems to be one of the subject areas because it has to do with marketing.
Yep.
And one of the reasons people don't pick a niche is because it's really scary as a human being. I mean, we think about this every week at Behavior Gap headquarters. Should we just put a stake in the ground and serve lifestyle financial planners like the business I built? Should we just say this is only, well, why don't we do that? Well, it's scary. That's why. So it's the same problem. Like you just really don't want to put yourself on the hook. So you look for all sorts of ways to think about it differently and think and think and think. So if we can just caveat the conversation with that of like, hey, the people
I
need
think that's fair. Like
just
we
like a warning, like
Yep.
warning could be placed to hide. Cool.
Okay.
Then like the actual question is super interesting, to be honest. Like I know it feels to me like if you have an occupation, we kind of covered a huge chunk of the world. Like if you have an occupation, it seems like you fit in a niche. If you don't have an occupation and you're retired, like it seems like if you have a financial, so my definition of a niche, or at least niche marketing, my way of thinking about it is find from the advisor's perspective, find a problem you're interested in solving. I like that idea because I want to remain interested. Find a problem you're interested in solving, and then find a group of people with that problem. And an occupation may be a shortcut to that. Like that's how I think about niches. So if you have a problem, and by problem, I don't mean negative. I just mean like textbook, like it's something that needs to be solved. If you have things that need to be worked out with money, and there are other people like you fit in a niche. Is that too much to be? I'm just shooting from the hip.
No, I like that framing, and actually my head goes to the same place that as you're framing, like, look, a niche is not much more than a problem that needs to be solved, and if there are multiple people who have the same problem, then being the solver of that problem makes you a niche advisor for people who have that problem. Steve Orging, who's written and waxed more eloquently than I can even about niches, he likes to frame this as like, look, a niche is a need, which I think like a version of the exact
That's
same
beautiful.
thing. Like,
yeah,
I need a problem to be solved, and if you're a problem solver of that particular problem, that becomes your niche. That is your specialization, for the simple reason, like, look, I can solve money problems of anybody who comes in because I'm a trained, educated financial planner who can think on my feet and figure things out. But the simple business reality is you will be more efficient if you're really good at solving one problem repeatably than if you solve whatever random problem someone comes in with because you just like to solve random problems. I mean, like if that's what you like to do, kudos to you. That can be your thing, but just kind of by definition of what makes a business efficient and scalable. Like I hear so many advisors say, I'm having trouble scaling my firm. I'm like, well, tell me about what you do and who you serve. I'm like, well, my clients are all different. I'm like, well, that's your problem. Like, how do I create a repeatable process for 100 people who all have different problems? The answer is there is no repeatable process because you picked 100 clients with different problems. If you pick 100 clients who have one problem and you get awesome at solving that problem, look at how efficient your business becomes, because now you actually can create a repeatable process to solve a repeatable need because you're helping people with that need. So but when I think about it from that end, where like a niche is a need, a niche is a problem to be solved. Well, yeah, I kind of think every client does fall into a niche. Like the only people who are left are people who don't have problems. And if they don't have problems, they're probably not going to hire you. Or if they do, they're probably not going to be willing to pay very much because it's kind of by definition not a significant problem. Because if it was, it would be a problem that could potentially define a niche. I do think it's worth reflecting, though, Carl, relative to what you said earlier. Like, if you look at a lot of our profession, we often define niches as serving other professions. Doctors, dentists, lawyers, etc.
Just occupationally.
And to me, like, first of all, just overall, like, occupation is just one definition of a niche.
Totally.
When we even look at the marketing studies that we do on the research end, like, we ask advisors who have niches what their niches are and how they define them. The majority of advisors do not define their niche by a profession. That's actually a minority of advisors. Happens to be a visible one, but like some do it by stage of life, retirees. Some do it by a specialized problems, divorcees, recent widows. Some just do it by, psychosocial and other dynamics, right? Christian financial advisors tied to values and faith. I know an advisor whose niche is progressive Democrats. That's like his political affiliation as his anchor. So you can do it lots of different ways. We often choose a profession-based niche, like the lawyers and the doctors and the architects and such, because just practically speaking, it's hard to pursue a niche if you can't figure out where to find them and like where they gather. And professions happen to do this in very convenient ways. They have publications, they have podcasts, they have conferences, they have membership groups. Like they're particularly like, they're like need in a box, like niche in a box, which makes it a little bit easier to pursue them. But not all niches are defined by professions. It means like it's any problem. It's high enough stakes that someone would pay for help, would pay for answers, would pay for solutions, would pay for advice, would pay for guidance, would pay for something. And so, like if a client can't fit a niche, like their problem literally fits no possible niche on the planet, like what problem is it? I mean, what problem do they have that they would be willing to pay for any help at all? Like I don't know how to draw a Venn diagram of I'm willing to pay a financial advisor, but it's not a problem. Like those Venn diagrams don't overlap.
Those are called two circles that don't overlap.
Oh boy, I'm now speaking to the master of drawing circles that do and don't overlap. I didn't
you gotta be
you
careful.
Literally have a picture of like overlapping Venn diagrams of one of your drawings, like over your shoulder here for anybody who's
you got to be careful because I get emails. We're going to get emails about this. We're going to get emails. I didn't know these people existed, but there's apparently the Venn diagram police, and they send very long, like 10-page emails on why what you just described is not a Venn diagram. So I send them to Kitces.
Okay, you can send it to me. I'll take. If I'm misusing Venn diagram, all seriousness, like educate me. Now you've just made me curious. I'm going to like look this up on the internet after our conversation.
But the point is, I have a problem, but I don't want to pay for it, or I don't. And I think, look, I love the idea. Again, I always say the shortcut into a niche, and I love that idea. A niche is just a need. The shortcut into a need is an occupation because you know where they hang out. They have similar, if you do. We've heard like private pilots or people who love to fly fish, but everybody who loves to fly fish that's not a financial problem. Like typically it's a shortcut into a common problem when somebody says, I'm a emergency room doctor that owns their own LLC and we contract with hospitals, so I have no plant equipment. Shortcut, boom. And I know where you hang out. But that doesn't mean progressive Democrats or people who are interested in climate or land conservation issues in the West. Well, land conservation issues in the West, there's a bunch of planning things that go along with that. That's interesting, right? So if you don't have any of those things, I don't know what you are. I don't know. So that would be the interesting thing is what's an example? Could we think of any example where you're basically a niche of one? Is that right?
Yeah, I do think there's such thing as a challenge of someone who has a problem that is so uniquely, ridiculously specialized that in practice, no advisor could formulate a niche around that particular problem, because you couldn't run a viable business on it. Like I can be a problem solver of that, but after I get the client who has that problem, I can't run a business on it, because the thing is such a unique specialized need that it's not
Yeah.
a viable thing to choose as a niche. And therefore, if no one picks that thing because it's so hyper specialized, then the client won't be, I mean, to me, like, the client would still have a niche, but there might be no advisor that ever serves that niche because of that
Right.
problem. But frankly, even as I say that out loud, like, then there's still a niche. You know what the niche is going to end up being?
People
Some
who
dude
don't
or
have niches.
dudette out there is going to make a business that is, I solve ultra complex problems that no one else knows how to solve.
Yeah.
And that's who they go to, right? I mean, you look at almost any profession, there's a subset of people in law and medicine and accounting that, like,
Wow.
you buy their freaking genius brain, you pay them like $1,000 an hour, and they figure out things that no one else has ever done or figured out before, because
Exactly.
some people are just so brilliant at that actually becomes their niches. I solve problems that no one else can solve, in which case even that client still has someone they can go to that does
Right.
that. But if you're that advisor, like, you only help people who have ultra complex problems that already got rejected by 9 other advisors who can't solve their problem, and you're charging
Yeah.
an ultra high premium to be able to solve the problems that no one else solves. So that's still a niche. Ironically, that's probably the best paying niche of them all, but it's still a niche.
Yeah, and your greatest source of referrals are advisors who don't want
We're
to
like,
try to
I have
solve that
no
problem.
idea how to solve
And
your
I
thing.
don't
I've never
know.
seen
Talk to Sally. I mean, because she's the only one I know that could even start.
Now,
Yeah.
I do think it's reflecting, there is sort of to me, just a meta question around this that I don't want to dismiss along the way, which is just, if everyone picks niches, just some segment of the population end up not getting served. Right? Just like, are there enough of us to cover down all the niches that there might be? And to be fair, I think the answer to that is no.
I agree.
But that's a problem no matter how you slice it, right? I mean, if I look overall, there's 300,000 financial advisors, give or take a little. Like, that's Cerulli's number. I think they measure it about as well as anybody does.
Yeah.
So if all 300,000 advisors can do meaningful financial planning for 100 clients, and I still think that arguably is a little bit high for deep planning relationships, but makes the math round and easy at least. 300,000 advisors, 100 clients per advisor, 30 million households get served.
Yeah.
There are 130 million households in the US. So if every person who puts financial advisor on their business card does deep, meaningful financial planning for the maximum load of clients they could do, we're almost getting to a quarter of the households in the US, but not quite.
Yeah,
like, that's how few of us there actually are relative to the population. And to be fair, a lot of those 300,000 are not really the most engaged in financial planning. If I want to use something like CFP professionals as a proxy, we're not even at 100,000 yet. We will be probably next year as we keep growing. So if 100,000 CFP professionals are doing financial planning, they serve 100 clients, we're serving 10 million households out of 130 million in the US. And in practice, I don't even think all 100,000 CFP professionals are really fully engaged in financial planning. So in practice, like, look, we already can't even serve 10% of the population. And frankly, the 10% that do want an advisor and need an advisor and are seeking out an advisor, like, they're going to find someone, because if anybody actually raises their hand and says they want an advisor, like, everybody pounces on them right now. Just try putting your name into a lead generation service because you're looking for an advisor, and watch how many responses you get. Like, any consumer who raised their hand for a financial advisor gets a quick pounce because we're looking for clients. But what that actually says to me in practice is, first of all, we don't serve everybody now. We're not even vaguely remotely close to serving everybody right now. There's only a small portion of the population that's actually even raising their hand and saying they want an advisor. Because if everybody was raising their hand, our problem would be I have too many clients, not I'm struggling with organic growth. In practice, we're still trying to justify the value to get clients to come on board, for which at the end of the day, why does a consumer end up hiring us? Like, because something hurts enough that they're willing to write our fees to get the problem solved, which to me just comes back to, there's not enough advisors to serve everyone, but there probably are enough advisors to serve the number of people who are raising their hands saying they have significant problems that they're willing to pay an advisor. That's why we don't have an avalanche of clients. And so if that's how many people have needs, we are covering them. The only question is, right, like if I take 100 advisors who are each going to serve 100 clients, we can all be 100 generalists and each struggle with a mediocre, not terribly efficient practice because each of us are doing 100 different things for 100 different people. Or we can organize ourselves to say we're a network of 100 advisors who have 100 different specializations and cross-refer to everyone. And all 100 of us will be more efficient and have 99 partners who drive our growth.
Right.
And we just serve people better.
Right.
Like, why would we not want to orient that way? Like, everybody wins in that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know who loses in that scenario.
Yeah. No, and I think it all comes back to like what we started with, which is super interesting thought exercise. And we've got so many more things to think about. Like, I think what this is pointing to, which is a really good question, which is, are we leaving people unserved? Yeah. And the answer is yes. And we've been talking about this for 20 years. How do we serve people who need help but aren't able to get it in a
which usually in
sustainable,
like,
profitable
how do we serve people who need help and can't or won't pay our fees?
That's exactly right. Like in a profitable
way that we charge,
way.
like that.
Yeah.
My heart still bleeds for that problem, and I'm concerned about that problem. But like, to niche or not niche does not solve that problem. Like, if you want to solve that problem, make the most badass, hyper specialized, high income niche that serves the absolute ideal clients who will pay you maximally what you're worth. Work a half client load, make 100% of your money on 50% of the clients because you're super awesome, super specialized, solving a high value need, and then take another 50% of your time and give it away pro bono if you want, and serve a whole bunch of people who you can't help, right? Even in that world, like, if I want to maximally serve people who can't afford my services, I would still do it by saying, I'm going to find the fewest people I can find who will pay 100% of my income needs.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to make any money on anybody else. And I can give away the rest of my services for free. Like, I call that the barbell approach. Like, all my clients are either going to pay my top dollar or nothing to maximize my reach. Anyone in the middle just makes that process less efficient. So even if I want to leverage myself, I would still find the most focused, high value specialization I could and generate all my income from the smallest number of clients I could. And then that gives me room to be free or pro bono or whatever you want to do for as many other people as you want. Because by definition, you don't need to get any money from them because you made it all at the other end.
That's the old effective altruism argument, right? Like, go make as much money as I possibly can so I can give and live on as little so I can give a bunch away. It's a very similar argument.
Yes, except at least my understanding of that world, that tends to be like, spend 30 years making it all and then spend 30 years giving it back to the world in a positive way. And like, you don't have to do them sequentially. To me, the opportunity
that's actually the new effective altruism movement for the last like 20 years has been really this idea of like, go get the highest paying job you can and live on. In fact, the guys that founded it live on the median income in the UK, and they're both Oxford professors. So live on like 35,000 pounds a year or something, and then give the rest away while you're alive, right? Like, and then be super effective with it. Like, think really carefully about, they always land on things like malaria nets or whatever, like, that are proven your impact per dollar super impactful. And I think that's the same argument you're making here. But to the question's point, it's like, I mean, we still have a lot of work to do to figure out how to help the people that need help, and we're thinking about it. But it's not a niche.
We have a lot to do there, but it's not a niche. It's not a niche or not niche problem. It's a, how do you serve people that can't afford what we do the way we do it and the way we charge?
Yeah, for sure.
Which is also a big problem. But it's different than the niche problem, and B, like, to me, the efficient solutions to solve it still start with get good at solving a problem you get paid well for, because it gives you more resources to solve the other problem of the underserved.
We should have started this with a version of the drinking game, but we should have just called it a marshmallow game. Like every time the word niche is used, you have to eat one giant puff marshmallow.
I think whether you do that with marshmallows or alcohol, that would be extremely unhealthy
Either way,
for this particular episode. Very, very unhealthy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was super fun. Thanks, Michael.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Cheers.